Opening in 1969, the State Regional Correctional Facility Greensburg would be the first regional state correctional institution to open in Pennsylvania, meant to hold short-term prisoners. Over the decades, the prison would expand multiple times in an attempt to relieve overcrowding, but it would be the most overcrowded prison in the state, holding double the intended amount of 461 inmates as it entered the final decade of operation, finally being ordered to close in 2013. The property would change hands a number of times over the following years, and was used as a filming location for multiple shows and movies, until finally demolition on the property would begin in 2025.
If you know Ruin Road, you know we value our privacy. In our personal life, it's not always easy to maintain. Whether we know it or not, sites will mine our data like full name, email, health records, and more, which they will sell to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who wants to snoop. That's why we started using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows us which data brokers are selling our personal information and automatically submits opt-out requests on our behalf. This not only reduces the amount of spam you'll get, but protects against hackers who can use this information to gain access to our social media, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also provides a ton of other features bundled into one easy-to-use app at an affordable price. You get antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without needing to bother with different apps. We all have one or more of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. And if you're a regular viewer, you'll know how often that happens. Like 24-hour security, motion sensors, and guard dogs, Aura is always on, doing the hard work of keeping my info safe so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. Relaxing. Ruin Road values our privacy, and we also value yours. Go to aura.com/ruinroad to start a free 2-week trial, also linked below in the description.
The history of SCI Greensburg dates back to 1963, when construction began on the new Westmoreland County Prison on 75 acres of land for a total cost of $2.8 million. Calling the old county prison outdated and barbaric, the new facility would offer GED classes, sports fields, a chapel, and a cannery to package the foods they farmed, and the first 29 prisoners would be transferred here in 1966. Almost immediately, talks of being purchased by the state were being held, but it would not be until 1969 when Pennsylvania Governor Raymond Schaefer signed a bill requiring prisoners with a sentence of more than 6 months, but less than 2 years, to be required confined to state-run facilities. And Greensburg would be purchased for $3.8 million. Immediately, the prison was being filled with men arrested for various crimes, from AWOL servicemen, 8 members of the Pagans biker gang, and a man who set his girlfriend on fire. A furlough program would begin for holiday season 1970, but already, within a year of operations, multiple prisoners had run away while on work release, as well as one prisoner that outright escaped the prison by sneaking through an open door while on paint detail. Officials were not even aware that Eugene Roney, who was at Greensburg on a manslaughter charge, was even missing until his wife phoned the prison saying he had arrived back home but wished to surrender. In 1972, it was learned that one inmate had not been accounted for an entire year while out on work release. That same year, new Pennsylvania Governor Milton Schaap would tour the facility, reporting that it was modern and clean. But the work release program was having issues, as African American inmates from Pittsburgh were finding the local rural community reticent to hire them, though things had been improving after the first year's tensions. Another 2 prisoners would escape by scaling the fences in 1974, the same time when Westmoreland County officials made an offer to purchase the prison back from the state, as they had continued to use the original county jail, which was over capacity. But when rejected, they would purchase a former laundromat building downtown to convert into a new facility. The following year, a committee would be formed to look into allegations of prison guards here sexually abusing inmates, as well as using drugs and alcohol on the job. But they would report they found no corroborative evidence, and when a probe was launched into the rest of the state facilities a few months later, Greensburg was excluded. But by 1977, the prison was noted as being severely overcrowded. When it was built, it was designed to hold 184 inmates, but was at 207 inmates with another 16 furlough prisoners required to stay here on the weekends. It was learned that some prisoners were being forced to sleep on tables in the library, using the books as pillows, and that summer, a prison guard who worked here for 7 years would be fired when an investigation found he was indeed sexually assaulting inmates. Expansions would be approved, bringing the population to 316 by 1982, and plans for a further 150 cells were in the works when prisoners went on a hunger strike over small portions that they were being fed, with one inmate saying they might as well feed them dog biscuits. Another prison guard here would be arrested by undercover officers in 1983 when an inmate came forward saying that Frank Calabrese had been trying to extort $3,000 from the prisoner, who he believed had connections with a Pittsburgh betting operation. Frank had been threatening to tell the man's wife he was having relations with other prisoners, or saying he would plant drugs in his cell if he did not give him the money. So police would set up a sting operation with an officer pretending to be one of the betting organization to pay Frank off, arresting him when he took the cash. In 1972, sisters at the Seton Hill College had begun teaching GED classes in religious services, called Operation Outward Reach, that aimed to provide employment experience for the inmates before their release. One unique accomplishment would be the construction of a 3,500 square foot pole barn on the grounds that took 2 years to be completely built by inmates for use as a carpentry and auto mechanics program. In 1986, after spending 12 years in prison for beating a woman with a baseball bat during a sexual assault, Donald Tedford would get a work release detail reserved for the model inmates. But just 6 months later, he would sexually assault and strangle another woman to death after she visited the flower shop where Tedford was working. He would receive a death sentence for the crime and has remained on death row to this day. That same year, the prison would be investigated yet again, and it was found that at least 3 employees had falsified records so that one of them could purchase a computer for herself. To combat the rising inmate population across the state, the prison would stop accepting inmates with less than a 6-month sentence, and it was renamed to SCI Greensburg in May 1986. At which time, the prison meant for 460 inmates had 834. While prisoners currently incarcerated would be allowed to stay, anyone sentenced in the future to less than 6 months would be the individual county's problem. By 1988, things had barely improved, with 727 inmates, still over capacity by a third, and tensions were only getting worse, when one prisoner would use a 12-inch piece of a mop handle to stab another 5 times in the cafeteria, though that man would survive. Less than 2 weeks later, a records employee at the prison would be arrested for theft at the Sears in the Westmoreland Mall, where he was also moonlighting as a security guard. A few months later, a prisoner staying in the trailer section would manage to simply slip away the day before July 4th. But an off-duty guard would spot him walking in downtown and detained him until police could arrive. The prison would go on a 3-day lockdown that November when a 50-inmate fight broke out in the recreational yard, sending 10 guards and 8 inmates to the infirmary.
Here's the control room for both.
In 1990, a $7.6 million expansion would begin to add 156 more cells and raising capacity to 617. But 3 years later, an audit would find things only worse, with 1,042 prisoners being held here, making it 71% over limits, while other facilities average around 50% over capacity. To solve the issue, 7 new prisons were slated to begin construction at a total cost of $760 million. Bell Telephone would uncover 2 inmates had devised a way to fraudulently collect calls from the prison, and in 1994 they would be charged with $33,000 of unpaid phone bills. At the same time, the ACLU would start a trial for one Vietnam veteran guard's refusal to being ordered to wear an American flag patch on his sleeve that had the stars in the rear, which signified retreat. The case would go all the way up to the Supreme Court by 1996, but ultimately was denied. In 1997, another fight would break out, resulting in one inmate having 3/4 of his ear bitten off. The rest of that year, though, was mostly filled with positive news. First, an article was run on the prison chaplain, Dorothy McDormand, when her sister Frances won an Academy Award for her performance in the movie Fargo. 2 of 3 adopted children, the McDormands had moved around the Midwest frequently while growing up, before eventually settling in Pennsylvania. As part of an annual charity drive, the Pittsburgh Pirates basketball players would visit the prison where they played against the inmates. Another worker profiled was Louise Fellon, who was retiring after leading the baking education program at Greensburg the past 12 years. She shared she was never worried working early morning with the cons. The only thing she needed to keep an eye on was the yeast, which would be stolen to make liquor. Here's their list. Max capacity for M1 was 74, M2 had 76, but you can see at the end there they didn't have very many. My mailbox, counselor, there's her name, U.S. Mail. Phones were over here. Check this out. Is that real? So this was the list of all the people in here and their assignment and stuff. So I wonder if he was one of the last people in here. Into the new millennium, 2 separate instances of narcotics being smuggled in here were thwarted. First, by a prison guard, and next when inmates have been writing letters to a food bank worker to smuggle them in with the food. A 2004 report would find Greensburg the most overcrowded prison in the state, holding 922 inmates in the facility still designed to hold just over 460, as the state had temporarily begun housing inmates from 2 other outdated prisons that were in the process of shutting down. In these last few years of operation, 2 separate female workers in the prison would be arrested for sexual relations with inmates, while another guard was found to have faked 15 of the 23 sick days he had taken over the past 3 years, simply by photocopying doctor's notes and changing the dates. Another female prison guard would be caught by the FBI for trafficking children with her boyfriend, an ex-con that she had met while he was imprisoned at Greensburg. Finally, in 2013, the prison would be shuttered to save $23 million per year.
It is a different kind of prison fight in Westmoreland County tonight as workers' families battle to keep SCI Greensburg from closing.
Today, prison employees were told that they will have 1 week to submit where they would like to be transferred to. As one employee put it, he only has a week to figure out what he's going to do with the rest of his life. Sitting at the kitchen table in the house they lovingly renovated, talking about the life they built, the Rigneys thought their future was set, and then suddenly all their plans were destroyed.
My husband called me on Monday, and I thought he was teasing. He goes, "I'm not teasing, did you watch the news?" And I said, "No." And he said, "They're closing." And I said, "What are you talking about?"
Corey Rigney's husband was talking about the closure of the state prison in Greensburg. Governor Corbett said last week that the prison will close in June and the 400 employees must find new jobs. Some employees will transfer to other local prisons, but the rest will likely have to move to Center County and find work at the new facility in Benner Township. With emotions running high, local lawmakers sent this letter to the state corrections office saying, "We request that you consider delaying your recently announced plan to close SCI Greensburg until January 2014. The Rigneys just drew up their own petition, but they have little faith that signatures or hearings will make the governor change his mind.
We elect him, we trust him, we believe in him that he's going to, treat us right, and he goes and does this behind our back.
Tomorrow morning, the Prison Employees Union will have a fairly large meeting here in Greensburg to discuss what their next step is, if they have any kind of recourse. They say that the state is now trying to change their contract. Reporting live in Westmoreland County this evening, I'm Courtney Brennan, Channel 11 News.
Though the guards would protest, the last inmates would be transferred out on June 30th of that year. 2 years later, the prison would be purchased at auction by a private company for just under $1 million, and they would begin renting it out for filming, with the movie 3 Seconds and television shows Banshee, Mayor of Kingstown, and Mindhunter all being filmed here. But when the plans to convert it into veteran housing never materialized, 3 years later, the property would be foreclosed on. Finally, the township would succeed in reacquiring the property, purchasing it for $3.5 million in 2023, announcing they plan to demolish the buildings, and in 2025, a further $2 million was approved to begin demolition. No plans for future use have been decided for the land that formerly housed Pennsylvania's first regional prison.